Ethan had always thought that living in a small apartment alone would be quiet and simple. But life had a strange way of surprising him, especially when it involved his new roommate. When he moved into the city's futuristic apartment complex, he had expected normal neighbors, normal humans, and normal routines. What he did not expect was a tiny alien creature living in the apartment he had rented. The alien introduced herself as Zira. She was no taller than a foot, with large, expressive eyes that seemed to see straight through him. Her skin shimmered slightly in the light, shifting colors like a liquid rainbow. Despite her small size, there was something powerful in her presence. Ethan remembered staring at her the first time they met, unsure if he should be scared or amazed. Zira, on the other hand, seemed completely calm, almost bored by the human's hesitation. "I live here now," Zira said in a soft, musical voice that sounded like chimes in the wind. "You follow the rules, I follow the rules. Clear?" Ethan nodded quickly, trying to act confident, though he was anything but. "Of course, totally clear," he said. The apartment itself was small, but cozy. One main living space, a tiny kitchen, and 2 small sleeping areas. Zira's portion was nothing more than a little elevated platform with a small blanket and gadgets that Ethan didn't even recognize. The city outside was buzzing with neon lights and flying vehicles, but inside, the apartment felt like a quiet bubble. Ethan thought he could handle this. Until the lockdown, it began late in the evening. The city's emergency alert system blared with loud red lights and an automated voice echoing through the streets. "Attention, citizens. Immediate lockdown in effect due to a security threat. Remain indoors. Do not attempt to leave your residence until further notice." Ethan froze. He looked at Zira, who was watching the alert on her tiny screen, blinking her large eyes. She made a small chirping sound, almost like laughter. "Well, that's unexpected," Ethan said, trying to hide the nervousness in his voice. "I guess we're stuck here." Zira hopped lightly to the floor, her movements quick and precise. "Stuck together," she said simply. Ethan did not understand the emphasis until a few hours later. By midnight, Zira began behaving strangely. She started pacing back and forth, her small hands fidgeting with her gadgets and her eyes darting around the apartment. Ethan tried to ignore it at first, thinking she might just be restless from the new environment. But then came the smell of sweet, pungent scent that made his head spin slightly. He blinked, trying to focus, but the smell seemed to fill the room surrounding him. Zira froze and looked at him, her pupils dilating. "It is time," she whispered. Ethan had no idea what she meant, but her tone carried an intensity that made him uneasy. "I don't understand," he said cautiously. "What's happening?" She tilted her head and let out a soft musical sound that resonated strangely in the small apartment. "I am in heat. It is a cycle of my species. It is intense." Ethan's brain struggled to process the words. Heat. Cycle. He had never encountered an alien species before, let alone one that could go into some kind of biological frenzy. The fact that they were trapped together due to lockdown made it worse. "You mean now? And we're stuck here?" "Yes," Zira replied, a hint of worry in her voice. "I cannot leave." "You cannot leave. We must survive this together." Ethan ran to his small work desk and opened his tablet, typing frantically. He tried to find anything about Zira's species, anything that could help him understand her biology. Hours passed as he read through alien databases, translating strange words and symbols into something he could grasp. He discovered that Zira's species experienced a biological cycle that was overwhelming for both body and mind, lasting several days. The intensity could make them restless, emotional, and in some cases, destructive without guidance. Meanwhile, Zira's pacing became faster. She climbed on the shelves, knocked over a small lamp, and hummed in a way that vibrated slightly through the room. Ethan tried to approach her cautiously, holding out his hands. "It's okay. I think I can help you," he said, though his voice trembled slightly. Zira froze and stared at him. She did not seem afraid, but she seemed uncertain. Ethan remembered reading that touch could be calming for her species if done gently. He moved closer, slowly, letting her see that he was not a threat. His hand hovered above hers, Like this?" he asked quietly. Zyra blinked slowly and let out a soft chirp. Ethan took it as permission. He touched her hand lightly, careful not to startle her. Instantly, her breathing slowed, and she stopped pacing for a moment. Ethan felt a small surge of relief. He had no idea if he was doing it right, but it was better than leaving her completely panicked as the night went on. Ethan tried several techniques to calm Zyra. He dimmed the lights, played soft music, and even attempted to engage her in small games using her alien gadgets. Zyra responded gradually, though her energy was still high. She darted around, climbed the furniture, and occasionally emitted small bursts of light from her skin, which Ethan discovered was a form of communication for excitement or stress. Despite the chaos, there were moments of connection. Zyra would stop and look at Ethan, tilting her head in curiosity. He would smile back, realizing that even though her biology was overwhelming, her intelligence and emotions were real and complex. They began to communicate not just with words, but with gestures, expressions, and the small glowing signals Zyra emitted. The lockdown outside added another layer of tension. Delivery drones occasionally hovered by the windows, dropping supplies. But Ethan was too focused on managing Zyra's heat cycle to pay attention. He learned to multitask, balancing the need to keep the apartment in order, maintain calm, and provide food and water for both of them. Zyra, in turn, began showing her own adaptability. She would fetch small items from shelves with incredible speed and precision, even helping to organize the clutter she caused in her excitement. By early morning, Ethan had created a small routine. He had figured out that puzzles and small interactive games distracted Zyra, enough to prevent her from harming herself or the apartment. He had learned the subtle patterns of her movement, predicting when she would dart or jump, and he adapted accordingly. Zyra seemed to trust him more, leaning into his guidance when her energy spiked through the long night. Ethan discovered something he did not expect. He was starting to admire Zyra, not in a romantic sense, but her courage, intelligence, and resilience fascinated him. She was vulnerable, yet capable, small yet powerful. He realized that surviving this lockdown together would not just be about managing a biological cycle, it would be about understanding and connecting. With a being completely different from himself, as dawn approached, Zyra finally settled onto her small blanket platform, exhausted but calmer. Ethan sat nearby, watching her breathe, noting the subtle shifts in her glowing skin as she relaxed. He felt a sense of accomplishment mixed with relief. They had made it through the most intense part of the cycle together. Zyra looked up at him, her large eyes reflecting a mixture of curiosity and gratitude. "You helped," she said softly. "You did not leave me." Ethan smiled, brushing his hair back. "We're a team, right?" "We survived this together," she chirped softly, a sound that Ethan had learned meant approval or happiness. For the first time, the tiny alien seemed completely at peace, curled up like a tiny, shimmering ball of light. Ethan leaned back, exhausted but proud. He knew this was only the beginning. Zyra's heat cycle would come again someday, and the lockdown might last longer next time. But they had survived the first night, the apartment. Though cluttered with toppled gadgets and glowing marks of Zyra's restless energy, felt like a small victory. Ethan realized that life with Zyra would never be boring. It would be chaotic, strange, and full of surprises, but also full of lessons about patience, understanding, and the strange beauty of interspecies friendship. As he drifted into a restless sleep, Ethan could hear Zyra's soft humming beside him, a comforting reminder that they were trapped together, but not alone. Outside, the city remained locked down, but inside the apartment, a fragile bond had formed, one that would carry them through the days ahead, heat cycles and all. The morning light spilled into the small apartment, bouncing off Zyra's shimmering skin. She was curled on her tiny platform, blinking her large eyes slowly, as if testing the world around her. Ethan, still weary from the previous night, rubbed his eyes and stretched, realizing that he was already thinking about how to manage the rest of their lockdown together. Zyra's heat cycle was not fully over, and the day promised to be just as chaotic as the night had been. Ethan quietly got up and moved to the small kitchenette. Trying not to disturb Zyra, he poured a cup of coffee for himself and some warm nutrient liquid into a small bowl for her. Zyra watched him with curiosity, her large eyes tracking every movement. "You are awake early," she said softly, her voice still carrying the musical lilt that made it feel like the room was filled with soft chimes. "I couldn't sleep much," Ethan admitted, placing the bowl near her. "I'm thinking about what we can do today to make things easier for both of us." Zyra tilted her head, observing him. "You've planned for me?" "Yes," he said with a small smile. "It's not just for me. I want you to be safe and calm. I think if we make the day structured, it will help you through the cycle." Zyra's ears are, what Ethan assumed were her ears twitched in approval. She took the bowl and sipped carefully, her small hands holding it delicately. "You care?" she said simply. Ethan shrugged, feeling a warmth in his chest. "I guess I do. You're complicated, but smart and interesting. I want to help you get through this." The morning passed slowly. Ethan arranged a series of activities for Zyra. There were small puzzles that required her sharp mind, interactive holographic games that kept her moving and focused, and soft music that seemed to soothe her. Each time her energy spiked, Ethan would calmly guide her toward a calming activity. Zyra responded well, though her small body was still restless and energetic. By mid-morning, Ethan noticed something new. Zyra began to exhibit alien abilities he had not fully understood before. With a small gesture of her hand, she lifted objects across the room, arranging them in neat piles. She could sense disturbances before they happened, moving instinctively to prevent accidents. It amazed Ethan. He realized that her species had evolved to handle challenges with precision and intelligence. Even in her heightened state, she was incredibly capable. "I didn't know you could do that," Ethan said, watching as she carefully balanced a stack of toppled gadgets. Zyra's eyes sparkled. "I can control small objects. It helps me focus when I am unsettled." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "Well, it's helping. And I'm learning too. I'm learning how to understand you." Their communication grew deeper. Zyra began to share small details about her home planet, her species, and her life before arriving on Earth. Ethan listened eagerly, fascinated by the world she came from. It was a planet of floating cities, bioluminescent forests, and beings who communicated not just through words but with light, sound, and subtle energy pulses. Ethan realized how much Zyra had sacrificed to live here, and he felt a growing respect for her. Outside, the city remained under lockdown. Delivery drones brought essential supplies, but Ethan was careful to manage their use. He did not want Zyra to become overwhelmed by too many new stimuli. He spent the day balancing supply management, apartment organization, and Zyra's needs. It was exhausting, but he found himself enjoying the challenge. He had never felt so alive, so responsible for another life. As afternoon approached, Zyra's energy surged again. She darted around the apartment, hopping from furniture to shelves, her glowing skin pulsating slightly. Ethan anticipated her movements now, moving with her rather than against her. He realized that patience and empathy were more important than control. By letting her express herself safely, he could guide her through the heat cycle instead of fighting it. "You are very patient," Zyra said, pausing mid-jump to look at him. "Humans usually panic," Ethan laughed. "A little tired but genuine." "Well, I'm learning fast. I don't have much choice, do I?" Zyra chirped softly, a sound that Ethan had come to recognize as a kind of approval or happiness. For a moment, they simply observed each other. He realized how different she was from any being he had ever known, yet how much they had in common: curiosity, intelligence, and the need for companionship. The afternoon brought another challenge. One of the delivery drones malfunctioned, dropping a small crate that scattered supplies across the apartment. Zyra immediately sprang into action, using her small telekinetic ability to gather the scattered items. Ethan helped, but he noticed how precise and efficient Zyra was, even in her heightened state. He felt a mixture of admiration and relief. They were a team now, working together seamlessly. As evening approached, Ethan decided it was time for a small break. He set up a holographic screen, and suggested a virtual adventure game that Zyra had never played before. The game required strategy, teamwork, and problem-solving, perfect for keeping her focused while giving her an outlet for her energy. Zyra eagerly joined, her small hands moving quickly over the controls, glowing skin flickering in excitement. For the first time since the lockdown began, Ethan felt a sense of calm. They laughed together, celebrated small victories in the game, and even created a few playful competitions. Zyra's heat cycle was still present, but it no longer felt chaotic. It felt manageable. By nightfall, Zyra's energy began to taper off. She curled up on her platform, exhausted but calmer. Ethan sat beside her, reflecting on the day. He had faced fear, confusion, and unpredictability. But he had also discovered something remarkable, a bond that went beyond species, language, and biology. "You helped me today," Zyra said softly, looking up at him with her large eyes. "You understand more than I expected." Ethan smiled, brushing his hair back. "I didn't do it alone. You helped me too. You taught me patience, focus, and how to adapt." "We survived together," Zyra chirped. A sound that Ethan had learned was a sign of happiness. She blinked slowly, her glow softening as she relaxed. For the first time in days, there was quiet in the apartment. Outside, the lockdown remained, but inside, a fragile peace had formed. Ethan realized something important. Zyra's heat cycle was only a temporary challenge, but the bond they had created would last far beyond it. He had learned to communicate without words, to guide without controlling, and to care without expectations. Zyra, in turn, had learned to trust him, relying on his guidance and companionship to navigate her most difficult moments, as Ethan prepared for sleep. He noticed Zyra had rearranged some of the gadgets she had knocked over earlier, neatly organizing them in a way that showed both her energy and intelligence. He chuckled softly. "You're a little whirlwind, you know that?" Zyra chirped, her glow flickering in amusement. "And you are patient enough to survive me." Ethan laughed quietly, feeling a sense of pride. "I guess we make a good team." She tilted her head, considering him for a moment. "Yes, good team. Future. Team." The words made Ethan smile. He realized that even though they were trapped by circumstances beyond their control, they had formed something remarkable: trust, understanding, and a deep connection that transcended differences. He felt a sense of hope, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. That night, Ethan drifted into sleep with Zyra curled beside him. The soft glow of her skin casting gentle patterns on the walls. The apartment, though small and chaotic at times, felt like a sanctuary. They were trapped together, yes, but they were not alone. They had each other, and that made all the difference. In the days that followed, Ethan and Zyra would face more challenges that continued lockdown. Supply shortages and Zyra's periodic energy surges, but they were ready. They had learned to work together, to understand each other, and to face the unknown with courage and empathy. And as the city outside slowly returned to normal, Ethan realized something profound. Life with a tiny alien roommate was unpredictable, exhausting, and sometimes overwhelming. But it was also full of wonder, learning, and friendship beyond anything he had ever imagined. He glanced at Zyra, sleeping peacefully, her glow fading into the soft light of the room. He whispered, more to himself than to her, "We survived. Together. And I think we're just getting started." The bond between human and alien had been forged in chaos, but it was strong, unbreakable, and full of promise. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side, a perfect, unexpected team in a world full of surprises.